My name is Megan O'Brien. I'm a speech-language pathologist here in Long Beach School District. And today we're going to do the fourth part of our four-part series on understanding bilingualism and what you can do at home to support your child in being bilingual or multilingual. So let's get started with separating fact from fiction. There's a lot of rumors out there. Sometimes you'll hear from people who mean well to do one thing versus the other. So let's look at some of those. For those of you who are watching in our audience, I want you to give yourself a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you think this is a true statement or a false statement. So the first statement is, children can't learn more than one language at a time. Is that true or is that false? And the next statement is, families should only speak English at home. Is that true or is that false? What do you think? The next statement says bilingualism causes language delay. Do you think that that's true or is that false? And finally, children who mix two languages are having a difficult time learning language. True or false? Well, the truth is, all of these statements are false. Children can learn multiple languages at one time. Families should speak the language they are most comfortable with, and we're going to talk about why as we go through this presentation. And bilingualism does not cause language delay. In fact, children with a language delay can easily learn just as well more than one language. And finally, children who mix two languages, that's not a problem. It's actually a natural part of learning a second and or third or fourth language. So let's look at some of the benefits of being bilingual, because there are many. Students who are bilingual understand math concepts and word problems more easily. They're able to develop strong thinking skills and use logic. They're better at focusing, remembering, and making decisions. They can think about language in a way that our monolingual peers do not. And they have an easier time learning other languages and often have better self-control. As an adult, they have more job opportunities. On average, adults earn $7,000 more a year than their monolingual peers. And they may have a delayed onset of Alzheimer's disease. That is some exciting research there about bilingualism. When we look at types of bilingualism, there are two ways of becoming bilingual. There's the simultaneous bilingualism, where you're learning more than one language at a time. And I said bilingualism, but it could be multilingualism. And the second type of bilingualism is sequential bilingualism. That's when you learn one language first, and at some point a second and or third language is introduced. This would be a child who speaks only Spanish at home and then comes to school and learns English there. Or it could possibly be a student who moved from Thailand in the 7th grade into the United States, and they're learning English now. Also, sequential bilingualism are those of us who speak one language at home, and when we get to middle and high school, we start taking a second language. That's also considered sequential bilingualism. There are a number of simultaneous methods for simultaneous bilingualism, and we're going to go over 4 of them today. The first one is called one person, one language. So that is exactly what it means. One person in the family speaks one language, the other person speaks the other language. So for example, mom speaks only Spanish to the child, dad speaks only English to the child. And the pro of that is that it's clear to the child who speaks which language. It's easy to apply, and it provides a lot of experience in both languages for the child. The con is it's difficult to stick to the rule. When you're having a family conversation and dad speaks English, mom speaks Spanish, and the child is going back and forth between languages, especially if dad doesn't speak Spanish or mom doesn't speak English, it's challenging to have a family conversation. Another con could be the minority language is not spoken as often, and one way to combat that is to speak at least 15 hours of each language a week. Research shows that if you speak at least 15 hours, the child's getting enough in order to grow within that language. The second form of method of simultaneous bilingualism that we'll talk about is called minority language spoken at home. And this means both parents speak their home language within the house. And a pro of that is the child gets a lot of exposure to the minority language. And when we're saying minority language here in America, English is considered the dominant language, so any other language that you're speaking at home would be considered the minority language. So again, the pro is they get a lot of exposure to the minority language. Siblings can easily speak within the family to each other, and some of the cons are both parents have to speak the language. So if, in this scenario, if one parent doesn't speak, let's say, Spanish, it wouldn't be a possibility within the home for that method. Another con is one place, one language is not, the child might not have a strong association with the language as they do with one person, one language. And then the next method of bilingualism is that we're going to discuss is context method or time and place. And what that means is that each language is spoken in a specific time and or place. For example, we speak English during the week, we speak Spanish on the weekends. We speak French in the morning, but we speak Spanish in the evening. It's delineated by time and or place. And so one of the pros is there's a little bit more variety and flexibility with it, and it's sort of a mix of the other two strategies, the one person, one language, and minority language spoken at home. So families sometimes appreciate that flexibility. The con is children may have an unbalanced exposure to the different languages. So again, you want to make sure that you're having at least 15 hours of communication with the child in every language. The final method is called the mixed language policy, and this is when parents use the language that best fits the situation or the person that they're speaking with. So for example, when you're talking about school, the family uses English. When you're talking about church or the family speaks Spanish. This is sort of a hodgepodge of all of the methods that have been discussed. It is very often seen in families and neighborhoods where there's a range of bilingualism. So when we speak with grandma, we speak home language because she only speaks home language. When we speak to dad, we speak English. When we speak to mom, we speak in English and in Spanish, depending on the topic. There's some more freedom there. So the pro is it takes very little planning or foresight, and the con is children may prefer one language over another, and oftentimes it's the majority language that they tend to gravitate towards. The most important, none of these methods are better than the other, but what's important is you stick to a method. It helps the child to figure out who and when I speak each language, and as a family, it makes sure that you have enough opportunity that you're presenting each language to the child in order for them to learn it. And again, make sure that you're using that 15 hours for each. When we look at the stages of sequential second language acquisition, so that's learning one language first and then the next language after that, there are 5 stages from pre-production or the silent period all the way to advanced language proficiency. And we're going to go over each of those stages. So the pre-production silent period lasts approximately 6 months to 1 year. So remember, this is a child who has not had exposure. I'm going to use the example of English. They possibly come to school and now they're exposed to English for the first time. They will go into what's called a silent period. Not every child does this. It really is temperament and behavior related. And they'll point and gesture and possibly say yes or no but not using any actual words. Sometimes people will get very concerned when a child comes to school and doesn't speak at all, thinking that they don't have any language and we have to get them assessed for speech and language. There's obviously a delay there. And as the speech pathologist, I have conversations with families about before they started school, were they speaking in sentences? Do they understand when you speak at home? And if the answers to that are, yeah, they've been normally developing and then all of a sudden stopped speaking when they got to school, I know they're in that silent period. They're absorbing the language like our babies do when they're first born. They're not speaking yet, but they're absorbing the language every day as they go through their day. The second level is called early production. This also lasts about 6 months. Children start to use 1 to 2 word phrases, and sentences are grammatically incomplete with 2 or more words per sentence. So the sentence can be misunderstood because it's such a shortened sentence. So they could say, play blocks, and what that means is, can I play blocks? Or it could mean, do you want to play blocks with me? But they haven't learned how to say that sentence yet. So sometimes they're misunderstood with what they're trying to say. The early production child has limited language comprehension, and they have about 1,000 words that they understand. That's called receptive understanding, receptive language. The third level is called speech emergence, and this stage lasts 1 year or longer. They're now beginning to have dialogue and conversation with their peers and teachers, and they're using unique sentences, not just I want milk, I see dog, but sentences that they come up with on their own. And they're becoming more confident in following the routine of the classroom, understanding what a teacher is saying, and communicating. The fourth level is called the intermediate language proficiency stage. This lasts about a year. Sentences are now becoming more complex. Their understanding of the language is good, and they still have some grammatical errors, but those errors are not interfering with them being understood. And finally, the fifth stage is called the advanced language proficiency stage. So that takes between 5 to 7 years to get to this stage. I'm going to say that again, 5 to 7 years. So I have this sort of fantasy in my mind, and when I did this research, I thought, oh, that won't work. Where I go to Costa Rica for the summer, and I go surfing, and I take Spanish lessons, and I come back, and I'm just so fluent in Spanish. And that's just not the case. Even full immersion in a language for a few months will not make a monolingual speaker completely advanced proficient in their second language or the new language that they're learning. But by the time children get to this stage, they have developed the specialized content area of school, the vocabulary of those specialized content areas. So words like microscope or linear or literature, words that we don't use in our conversational speech, but we see at school, they'll have understanding of that. They can speak English using the grammar and vocabulary comparable to their monolingual peers by this point. But I want you to remember, since we're talking about, the birth to 5 population here, your kids who start CDC or Educare or Head Start, they're going to get a good foundation for learning English if this is their first exposure to English, but they're not going to leave being fully proficient in the language. They'll have some conversations with you, as we saw in the stage 4 and stage 3, they're starting to have those conversations. But when they get to kindergarten, they're still going to need to practice and learn, and having that advanced vocabulary will take a couple more years depending on how long they've been exposed to English. So how can you support language development at home? The tips for supporting multi or bilingualism is no different than what you would do with teaching your child language at home, building their vocabulary at home. What I want you to focus on specific to supporting home language is You want to continue to use your home language, whatever it is and by whatever method you choose. We talked about those 4 methods of one person, one language, or time and place, mixed language. I want you to make sure that you're picking a method, but using that language foundation, using that home language to support your child for so many reasons. Having a strong language foundation will support your child in learning English when they're ready or when they get to school. And it supports your cultural and familial ties. It's important for your child to be able to speak to grandma or to speak to auntie who comes and visits once a year. Understand what's happening. It's how we pass down our culture, and our family history is in large part through language. So I want you to ignore well-meaning people, and unfortunately I've worked with teachers who've told students and told families, speak English, they need to learn English. But that is not what the research says. The research says, please speak your home language, the language you are most comfortable with. I call it the language of your heart. So you're passing down that family, culture, and history, as well as providing that language foundation. If you really want your child to learn English, that's okay, that's fantastic, but I want you to make sure that the person who's exposing them to English speaks English well. And the reason I say that is you want to make sure that you're exposing them and teaching them the correct grammar of the language, the vocabulary, the rich vocabulary of a language. For example, if I was to only speak Spanish, I speak un poquito, very, very little Spanish. I would have the word grande for big. But in English, I can say enormous, humongous, gigantic. These are words that I can expose my child to, building that vocabulary, laying that foundation that I can't do if I'm struggling to speak Spanish with my child. So make sure you're speaking the language of your heart and the language that you're most comfortable with to give that strong foundation. And again, making sure that each language your child is exposed to, they're getting at least 15 hours a week in order to promote that development of the language. So when we're looking at building language, and again, these are strategies that are good for your monolingual English speakers or monolingual Spanish speakers or children who are learning 2, 3, or 4 languages at a time. And by the way, the one person, one language can be exposing your child to 4 languages at a time. Mom speaks Spanish, dad speaks French, grandma speaks English, and the child will figure out who can speak which language, which language I use when I speak to each person. So these strategies that I'm going to go over now are for all language development, monolingual or bilingual kids. You can promote your home language development every day through regular activities that you're already doing, through activities like dressing and bathing, eating, doing chores, going for a walk, reading stories, singing songs. All of these are ways that we support, all of these activities are ways that we can support language development in general. And again, making sure that you're modeling grammatically correct sentences for your kids, regardless of what their age is. You want to talk about what your child is seeing and doing, how they're possibly feeling. Talk about how the food tastes, what it looks like. Talk about the colors that they're seeing, the objects that catch their attention. Use interesting words that gain their attention, such as, wow, uh-oh, oh no. Especially for young babies and toddlers, those really are interesting words that get their attention and keep them in a conversation, taking turns back and forth. You want to be sure that you're making more comments than you are questions, and the ratio is 3 to 1, 3 comments for every question that you ask. And again, the reason we do comments is you are teaching the vocabulary. You are laying that foundation when you make a comment. When you ask questions, you're testing your child's knowledge. It's not that questions are bad, but if we're asking questions they don't have the answers to yet, we're not having that back and forth conversation, and the conversation will stop. When you do make a comment or a question, make sure that you're pausing, giving your child time to answer that question. The pause time is really important. Young ones are slower to process what we're saying, and so giving them that time will help them to process. And I wait with some expectation that they're going to answer me. I'll say, wow, the puppy is so fluffy. And I look at them and I wait. So putting in that pause time will give them an opportunity to say or do something back. Again, don't be afraid to use those big words like I talked about. You want to expose your child to a rich vocabulary. Words like fluffy and shiny and humongous and gross and slimy. All of those words that in your home language that you're comfortable with, you'll be able to expose your child to. And then again, you can repeat what your child says, adding a word or two, and this will show them how to use a longer sentence. You can also repeat back what your child says. We talked about how it was fiction, not true, that a child who mixes languages is having a hard time learning language. That is a completely normal process of learning multiple languages at a time. And for those of you who are adults, I'm sure there's plenty of times what you'll say, go get me the leche. That's very normal that we all do that for those of us who are bilingual. You want to present the sentence back to your child in whatever language you're speaking with them so that they have that foundation of how to do that, especially when they're mixing the grammar. So in English we say the blue car, but in Spanish you say carro azul. So if your child says, Mommy, look at the car blue, I would say back, if I'm the English speaker, yeah, look at the blue car. So I'm just showing them through my example, here's how we say that. So I'm going to go through these pictures together and give you some examples. When I first created the presentation, we were doing it for a live audience, but with everything going on, it's currently just an online presentation. So I'm going to go through and give you the examples. So looking at the dog, some comments that I might say is, the doggy is all wet. He's jumping in the water. A question that I might ask is, what color is the dog? When I'm looking at the beach, I might say, wow, that's a big wave. Oh, the water is so cold, my toes are freezing. And then I might ask a question, are your toes cold? Waiting for your child to respond, remembering that we're making more comments than we are questions. And then finally, a comment that I could say about the child, the little girl who's blowing bubbles is, pop, pop, the bubbles are popping. Or I could say, I'm going to pop it. Where did the bubble go? So does anybody have any questions? I forgot to mention that you're able to ask questions while you're watching online. We have people here who can read the questions off to me. If you're thinking it, somebody else is probably thinking it. So please feel free to send those questions in and I'll answer as the presentation goes along. Do we have any questions right now? Okay, just checking. And then, so if you look at the little girl who is hanging upside down on the ladder, another thing that I would say is, wow, you are so strong. You're upside down. I'm giving these examples in English because I only speak English, but you would say these comments in whatever language you're speaking with your child. And then I would say, do I look funny when you're upside down? That might be a question that I would ask there. That comment teaches what upside down is. While your child's in the position and you use the word, they're learning what that means. Those location words, the colors, the shapes, the textures of things. When your child is interacting with things and you give the words for how they look or how they feel, they're learning those words as you go. So it's really important that as they're doing it, you're encouraging them by explaining and commenting on what they're doing. Some additional comments that I could make here would be looking at the two children who seem to be jumping in puddles. I would say, wow, that's a big splash. Instead of saying, what are you doing? This is a really common question that we tend to ask kids. What's this? What color is it? What are you doing? Those are not bad questions, but they only answer them in one word, and it sort of stops the flow of that conversation. So you want to make sure that you are asking, you are making those comments. Looking at the little girl with the blueberries, I would say, wow, I like blueberries too. Yum. Blueberries, they're my favorite fruit. And just by saying those words, blueberries and fruit, you're teaching the category of fruit. Blueberries go in the category of fruit. You don't have to teach it that way that I just said it. Your interaction in a natural way teaches children this is a fruit versus this is a vegetable. When you're in the supermarket, you can say, let's get some vegetables. I'm going to get carrots, and I'm going to get squash, and I'm going to get peas. Just naming it and talking about it with your child teaches them what those categories are. And understanding categories is important. It's how we store information in our brain, and it helps children to be organized. So making sure that you're using those words as well, not just color and texture and shape and size, but also what group or what category something fits into. Looking at the watermelon, I might say, wow, those are a lot of seeds. Let's count them, and we'll go through and count the seeds. A question I might ask would be, what would happen if we planted the seeds? What would grow? That lets your child think about it. Again, using the language that you're most comfortable in and the system and method that you've created and that you've decided to follow. Looking at the little boy who's in what seems to be a hammock to me, I often use routines with kids. So I would possibly push him and say 1, 2, 3, and I'd wait for him to say, go. So he's taking a turn in the interaction, and then I would push. This is teaching the numbers, how to count in order, how to take turns. There's that routine involved. And then finally, the little girl, if we can imagine she's looking at a puppy, we could comment on, that puppy is silly. He's playing in the grass. I wonder what the puppy's name is. That would be a question. Again, making sure you're using more comments than questions. Speaking of questions, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do have a question.
Okay.
One commenter is saying, what should I do when my daughter answers me in English, even if I speak to her in Spanish?
That is a very, very common experience. Almost everybody I know has the same difficulty. I'm not quite sure why children do this, but my response is keep speaking Spanish. And if she keeps answering in English, just keep speaking Spanish. You are supporting the home language, you're supporting her development of understanding the language, so that when she chooses to speak it later, and hopefully she will, she'll have that receptive understanding of the language. I'm not, for little ones who start school, I sometimes wonder, especially with Spanish, Spanish is a multi-syllabic language, and so it's easier to say shoe than it is to say zapatos. Most words in Spanish are multi-syllabic, meaning they're longer. I don't know if it's for ease or if it's that they've internalized, well, we speak English everywhere else, I'm not going to speak this language with you. Even if they give you an attitude and keep speaking English back to you, I definitely recommend you continue to speak Spanish. And speaking of that, I want to make sure that you are also reading in your home language, singing songs in your home language. That's another way that we pass down culture. By reading in your home language, you're building vocabulary and showing them the importance of reading. There's a YouTube video that we created on March 3rd about books and language. You can go back and look at that. Regardless of what language you're speaking with your child, the importance of books are really there and discussed in that training. When you play with your child, we also did a training on play on March 10th. Go back and look at that. How to build language during play. And then singing with your child. I want to caution you when you're singing, sing in your home language, sing in the language of your heart, but sing slower than is usually presented in published music. Like I said earlier, children are slower to process language, and so we want to make sure that we're giving them time to sing along with us. If it's a repetitive song or a song that you've sang many times, I often pause the song so they can take a turn and fill in the blank. So, for example, the itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. And then I wait for them to say down, and that might be their turn, and then I keep going with the song. But I slow down my rate so they can attempt to sing along with me. Everything that you do with your child makes a difference. So reading, singing, playing, all helps them grow their language regardless of how many languages they're being presented with. Do we have any more questions or comments from the audience?
We did have a couple of questions. One, not necessarily on this topic, but asking about speech delay. Are there any websites that could help my son who's 4 with speech delay? And maybe in a bilingual house as well for that.
Sure. So my colleague Lauren Bowman did a presentation on speech and language development on February 25th. That's also in the YouTube archives in the Long Beach YouTube channel. You can take a look at that to see what's typical development. The websites, I am much more a proponent of your interaction with your child. We can learn some vocabulary and some skills, but regardless of what activity you're doing with your child, you need to be doing it with your child to build the language. So even if you're using a website that's language-based or education-based, you need to be there with them to build that interaction. That's how we build language. The interaction between people is how we learn language best. So I have websites that I use for speech and language development, for speech therapy, but anything that you present your child with, and I mean this truthfully, the way that you present it can support language development. So if you are playing with a brown paper bag, you can talk about the noise that it makes, the color that it is. You can put things in and take things out. All of that is learning language. So any website that you go to, if you are building that language into it, it becomes an educational website for you to use. What I find with my students with websites that are interactive, they stop talking to me and they focus on the website more than me. And then I have to get into the conversation with them. So I'm the keeper of the iPad, or I'm the keeper of the electronic device, so that I'm creating and forcing interaction. So even the best website, if they're completely focused on the website, that interaction isn't happening. So I don't really have specific website suggestions for you, but while you're interacting with any device with your child, make it interactive between you and your child. Any more questions? No? Okay. So I have a few websites actually that I used to create here. This is some references and resources for you. The first one is out of the Office of Head Start, and it is suggestions for the bilingual child. And then 2 websites that I found really informative and interesting was the bilingualkidspot.com and bilingualkidsrock.com. And they have a host of information about the methods that I talked about today and ways that you can support bilingualism at home. And then ASHA.org is the governing body for the speech-language pathologists in the United States, and I used a lot of their resources. And the next one is Hanen.org, and they have, not just for bilingualism, that exact link will take you to a page on bilingualism, but on their website, this is a nonprofit organization, and they have a parent tab, and in that drop down are all kinds of activities and things that you can do with items around your house. Play-Doh, shaving cream, bubbles, and how to build language through using those objects, while using those objects. And finally, ReadyRosie.com has, for those of you who are already connected, the CDC, Head Start, and Educare, and I believe Buffum TLC have all their families connected already. But because of what's happening right now with the coronavirus, the mayor of Long Beach sent out, and I believe it's Learn Long Beach is the code. So you go to readyrosie.com, sign up, and you put in Learn Long Beach, and it's free right now. You don't have to be connected to a school. And in that website are 2 to possibly 3-minute videos, the longest, on a variety of topics. They're broken up by age, and it's a video showing examples of a parent and a child interacting, teaching math skills, language skills. There's some information about bilingualism on there, how to talk about sorting, how to sing, how to read with your child. It's really, really user-friendly. If the Learn Long Beach isn't the code, go back to the longbeach.gov COVID page, and it will tell you on their page what the code is. Because of what's going on right now, agencies across the nation are giving us free opportunities for learning, and that's one really useful, really for parents to watch and then implement what they learn there. And like I said, they're just a few short minute, 2-minute, I think the longest I've seen is about 2.5 minutes for you to watch and then immediately implement with your child at home. And the videos go from birth up to 3rd grade. I'm most familiar with the birth to 5-year-old videos, but I have loved every video that I've seen and found it really useful for parents, so I'm sure for older kids it would be useful as well. Any last questions?
We do have a question, and it's one that I know you answered, but maybe you could just give this parent a little more clarification. She said, my son is late to talk, so we decided to use English only, and right now he's a bit better, so I can start to teach him my language. It is not difficult for him. But then she goes on to say, if I speak broken language, so it should be better that I speak my own language to him, and I think it might be Khmer or an ancient language.
It is
Spanish.
best if you speak the language that you're most comfortable with. So your child, if it's Khmer that you're speaking at home, or any language for that matter, when you lay that foundation in your home language, and they can have conversations with you when they're 3 years old, and they have the vocabulary that's appropriate for a 3-year-old, learning English when they get to school at 3, 4, 5, or 6 years old will be so much easier when they have that foundation. So if you're struggling to speak English, don't speak English with your child. If you want to learn English, there are ways for you to do that as an adult, and I think that's a fantastic thing for you to do, but practicing with your child who is learning language now is not the best way to do it. You can practice with a friend, practice with another adult, set time aside to practice your English, but not when you're speaking with your child. With your child, you want to speak the language that you're most comfortable with, that you can use variety of vocabulary and use strong, grammatically correct sentences. And I'll just say it again, sometimes doctors and teachers and community members are supporting families in only speaking English, but if you don't speak English well, you're not helping your child. It actually has the reverse effect. So even if your child is a late talker or is developmentally delayed when it comes to language, speak the language that you're most comfortable with, and when they are ready, they can learn English just as well as other students who do not have language delays. So figuring out when and how to introduce English is a family decision. If you yourself are real comfortable with English, I say go ahead and speak it if that's your choice, but make sure that you are using those grammatically correct sentences that set that language foundation. Any other questions?
That's all for here.
So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you have a wonderful and safe day, and be well.